It's Fernando Ruiz Art.
Hi everybody, thanks for tuning in. Now tonight we're in for a bit of an experiment because the character we're drawing tonight is he's not exactly an A-lister in the Archie universe, but he is fairly popular and fairly important. But he's the sort of character that the non-Archie fans might not remember him 100%. And I'm talking, of course, about Riverdale High's principal, Mr. Weatherbee. And Mr. Weatherbee is one of the rotund characters. He's one of the fat guys. There's a couple of fat guys in the Archie cast. Pop Tate, Coach Cleats, and of course Mr. Weatherbee. Yeah, Archie's dad too. Fred Andrews to a degree. He's one of the fat ones too. Not as fat as Mr. Weatherbee or Archie. So Mr. Weatherbee, he's got kind of this eggplant-shaped head. He's got these tiny little glasses that just rest on his long nose. Mr. Weatherbee is one of the characters who has the Jughead nose, the same nose as Jughead. Another one being Miss Grundy. And I know somebody out there is going to want a Miss Grundy video. And this is Mr. Weatherbee in action. Maybe chasing after Archie. Mr. Weatherbee, of course, he is bald. He's clean bald. Got tiny little ears. How's that look? Let's get in a little closer. A close-up for Mr. Weatherbee. And I'm indulging in getting so detailed with his face at this point. Like I said, I like to... I've said this before in my other videos. I like to move around the figure, all around the figure, before I start getting into details. And Mr. Weatherbee has those little strands of hair. I always wondered if that was supposed to be some kind of cheap toupee, because those strands are always flying off his head whenever he starts, whenever he's surprised, he's gets a shock of some type. Weatherbee here, he's running. Move down to his legs. Now, when I was at Archie, I remember fairly early on, my editor, the great Victor Gorelick, he gave me a Mr. Weatherbee story. And I don't remember if it was a story that starred Mr. Weatherbee or if there was just a lot of Mr. Weatherbee in the story. But it was a heavily Weatherbee story. And Victor, he says to me, well, he noticed that I hadn't done much Mr. Weatherbee. So he gave me a story to see how I do. He gave me a Mr. Weatherbee story to see how I'd handle the character. I don't know why that particular character required such an audition, but he gave me this Weatherbee story. So now I used to, whenever I was given a story, I used to turn them in about a week. Really under a week, because back then I was doing 2 stories a week. And they'd be about 5 to 6 pages in those days. And so the next week I bring back that story, and Victor looks at my Mr. Weatherbee work and he says, well, you didn't do too good. He didn't like it. So you know what I'm going to do? And me, being naive, I said, I guess you're not going to give me any more Mr. Weatherbee. And Victor, who really knew a thing or two about editing and even about teaching, he said, that's exactly what I'm not going to do. Because if I don't give you Mr. Weatherbee stories, you'll never get good at drawing Mr. Weatherbee. So he did give me more Mr. Weatherbee stories, and I guess I improved, because at some point he was giving me a lot of Mr. Weatherbee stories. So at some point, I guess he came around, or I guess I got better. But I always remembered that. I always remembered that lesson. You don't just turn people off. You don't just write them off and say, well, he drew a bad Mr. Weatherbee, so he'll never draw a good Mr. Weatherbee ever. No, he gave me the chance to get better at it, and I guess it worked out. So Victor was the guy too who did give me my my break at Archie. When he came to the Kubert School where I was a student and I was graduating, Victor was the guy who came out. He looked at my portfolio. He liked what I can do, and he gave me a job right on the spot. He hired me for my first story. So we lost Victor tragically earlier this year, unfortunately. And whatever else, he did give me my break, and he did teach me a lot. So I'll always thank him for that. So, how's Mr. Weatherbee looking? He's pretty spry for one of the fat guys. As I said, this is a big experiment for me, and we'll see how the views go on this video, because I could see people reading the title of the video and going, who? And then just not clicking. So if this thing doesn't get clicks or likes, that's it. I'm pulling the plug on the whole channel, or at least any future Mr. Weatherbee videos. I doubt he'll do as good as Veronica did, or Cheryl Blossom in a bikini. She was gold, as you might imagine. But a fat bald guy running? I don't know. I don't know. This is a real gamble I'm taking here. But I always I live to please my subscribers. I live to please my viewers. So I hope you guys will appreciate the risk I'm taking here. If nobody watches this, then that's it. I'll be doing those Korean videos where I just eat a meal in front of you. How about that? Gotta give Mr. Weatherbee his shoe here. His foot. There we go. Give him black shoes. And I gotta go back up here and give him a hand. Literally, give him a hand. Maybe he's, instead of just a fist, he'll be running and gesturing. There we go. If you like my hands, don't miss out on my video on how to draw hands. Another thing I remember about, I'm thinking about now that as I draw this, speaking of Mr. Weatherbee, Victor Gorelick always had in his office a framed, I believe it was an acrylic painting, a framed acrylic painting of Mr. Weatherbee. And it was painted by the great Bob Bowling. And Bob is a longtime Archie artist who drew, probably most famous for his work on Little Archie. And you know, now that I say that, Little Archie is fairly untouched territory in my videos. And I should really remedy that, because I was a huge Little Archie fan. Now, my Little Archie artist, don't tell Bob Bowling, but my Little Archie artist was the great Dexter Taylor. He was the one that was drawing Little Archie when I was a kid growing up. And I really loved Dexter's Little Archie. And Bob Bowling, Bob is in his 90s. I don't remember how far into his 90s, but he's in his 90s. And he still does the occasional work for Archie. He still will write and draw the occasional story. So God bless him. All right, so Mr. Weatherbee, a couple of lines here to emphasize his gut. I'm gonna give him a little bit of a belt. And that's Mr. Weatherbee. Oh, let's give him a shadow. He's running. He's running so fast. He's not even touching the ground. Maybe even leaving a trail of dust behind him. What do you think? What do you think of my Mr. Weatherbee? So get the whole thing in the shot. Good. Have you learned a thing or two about drawing the obese? Excuse me. All right. So that's Mr. Weatherbee. Archie's nemesis, his arch enemy, his principal. I hope I've done him justice. I hope you've learned a thing or two about drawing the more rotund figures of the Archie universe. And as always, if you've got any other characters you'd like me to tackle, please let me know. I don't take these requests in order. I kind of, you know, I'll admit, I take them as I feel like it. You know, that's, please indulge me in that. I do try to accommodate all the requests, but I do take them as the mood hits me to draw them. So, thanks for watching. Again, any questions, comments, feedback, complaints, post them in the comments section below. Let me know what you think. If you like this video, please click like. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Feel free to share everything, post these everywhere. Tell your friends, wake the neighbors, call the kids, and above all else, keep drawing, everybody. Keep drawing, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye, everybody.